She was auctioned off while still bleeding from birth, but one cowboy bought her just to give her a offer. Town Square Day. The sun burned white-hot over the small frontier town of Red Hollow, baking the dirt streets into cracked clay. Dust rose with every footstep, carrying the sour smell of sweat, horses, and cheap whiskey. At the center of it all stood a rough wooden stage, an auction platform stained with the footprints of livestock, prisoners, and now something far worse. A crowd gathered, restless, voices rising like a cruel tide. Men laughed. Women whispered. Children clung to their mothers, curious and afraid. And on that platform, barefoot, pale and trembling, stood Clara Bell, no more than 20, her torn calico dress clinging to her thin frame. Her skin was damp with fever, her face bloodless. In her shaking arms lay a newborn barely a day old. The tiny baby whimpered, wrapped in a torn blanket that had once been a bedsheet. Blood still soaked the hem of Clara's skirt. She could hardly stand. Beside her, her brother Errol reeked of whiskey. His eyes were glassy, his words slurred. "Now listen up, boys," he shouted, wobbling on the edge of the platform. "I'm sellin' what's left of my sister here. She's young, she's strong, and she's got a baby. A man could use both." The crowd howled with laughter. Clara's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her mouth was dry. Her head swam. The edges of her vision flickered black. "Please," she whispered weakly. "Please don't." Earl yanked her upright by the arm. "Shut up. You ain't in no place to beg. You're a burden, girl, and I'm done feedin' you and that brat." The baby began to cry, a thin, pitiful sound that pierced the din. From below, men started shouting bids. $5. 10. 10.5 if she can work. Laughter rolled through the crowd. Clara's body trembled, her eyes darting toward the dusty horizon as if searching for an escape. But there was none. She clutched her baby tighter, murmuring, "Hush, my love. Mama's here." Then, just as Earl raised his hand for the next offer, a voice cut through the noise like a blade. "I'll take her." Silence. The crowd turned. At the edge of the square stood Jed Carter, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low, his duster coated with trail dust. He looked like a man who'd seen too much and said too little. Earl squinted at him. You want her?" Jed didn't smile. "I said I'll take her." Earl gave a half-drunken laugh. "You know she's ruined, don't you? Just had that brat yesterday. She's got nothing left worth buying." Jed reached into his coat and tossed a small leather pouch onto the platform. The heavy sound of silver coins silenced everyone. "Plenty worth more than what you are," Jed said flatly. Earl blinked. "That's more than she's." Jed cut him off. "She's comin' with me. Now." The sheriff, leaning against a post, looked up but didn't intervene. Nobody in Red Hollow ever interfered when it came to the auctions. Earl shrugged. "Fine. She's yours. Don't say I didn't warn you." He shoved Clara toward the steps. She stumbled, nearly falling. Jed caught her before she hit the ground. For the first time, Clara looked up at him, her eyes wide, glassy, frightened. "Please," she whispered hoarsely. "Don't hurt my baby." Jed's gaze softened. "Ain't gonna hurt either of you, ma'am." Her knees buckled. The baby let out a tiny cry, and Jed quickly took off his coat, wrapping both mother and child inside. He lifted them as if they weighed nothing. The crowd murmured as he turned toward his horse. "Guess Carter's gone soft," someone sneered. "Probably wants a woman to warm his bed," another said with a chuckle. Jed ignored them. His boots struck the dirt, heavy and deliberate. Each step echoed against the silence that followed him out of the square. Earl shouted after him, "She ain't your problem, cowboy." Jed stopped just long enough to glance back over his shoulder. "She wasn't yours either. That's the problem." And then he was gone, riding into the distance, dust rising behind him like smoke. Trail through Mercy Ridge, dusk. The sun dipped low, bleeding orange into the horizon. Jed's horse moved steadily through the rocky path, hooves crunching on frost-hardened dirt. Clara lay half-conscious in front of him, the baby pressed to her chest. Jed's arms steadied her, but his expression was unreadable, a man both haunted and determined. He whispered to the mare, "Almost there, girl. Just a bit more." Clara stirred faintly. Why'd you do it?" Jed hesitated, the wind carrying their breath away. "Because nobody else would." She tried to focus on his face, but the pain blurred everything. "I don't even know your name." "Jed," he said softly. "Jed Carter." She nodded weakly before her head fell against his chest. Jed looked down at the baby who had finally fallen asleep. "Don't worry, little one," he murmured. "You're safe now. Both of you are." Jed's cabin, night. The ride stretched into darkness. A single lantern glowed in the distance. Jed's cabin, small but sturdy, hidden beneath tall pines. He dismounted carefully, carrying Clara and the baby inside. The cabin smelled of pine, leather, and smoke. A single chair, a stone hearth, a rough-hewn table. Jed laid her gently on the bed, then stoked the fire to life. The flames caught, lighting her pale face. She was burning with fever. He boiled water, tore clean strips of linen, and tended to her the way a man does who's done it before, and lost someone once because he hadn't done enough. Outside the wind howled. Inside, only the crackle of fire and the baby's soft breathing filled the silence. Jed sat beside the bed, hat in hand. "You ain't a burden, ma'am," he said quietly. "Not anymore." He looked toward the cradle he'd once built for a child who never lived long enough to sleep in it. Now maybe it had a purpose again. As the storm rumbled over Mercy Ridge, Jed Carter kept watch over the woman he'd bought, not to own but to free. And for the first time in years something stirred in his heart, a feeling he thought he'd buried with his past. Oh. The dawn broke cold and gray, mist curling around the pine trees that cloaked the high ridge. A thin trail of smoke drifted from the chimney of Jed Carter's cabin, the only sign of life for miles. The night had been long. The storm had passed, but it had left the ground slick with mud and the air heavy with silence. Inside, a baby's soft cry echoed beneath the roof beams. Jed's cabin, continuous. Clara Belle lay still on a bed of straw and furs, her skin slick with sweat. Her breathing was shallow, lips cracked from fever. Her child, little Hope, fussed weakly beside her in a bundle of patched cloth. Jed knelt near the hearth, stirring the pot that simmered over the fire. Steam rose with the faint scent of sage and wild mint, remedies he'd learned from a neighbor midwife years ago. His hands moved carefully, like a man who knew too well how fragile a life could be. He dipped a rag in the warm mixture and pressed it gently to Clara's forehead. She flinched at the touch, whispering something in her half-sleep. "Shoo," Jed murmured. "You're safe, ma'am. Rest easy." Her eyes fluttered open, confused, glazed with fever. Where am I?" "My place," Jed answered softly. "Out past Mercy Ridge. You fainted not long after we left town." She blinked slowly, trying to recall. "The auction," her voice cracked, barely audible. "My brother." Jed's jaw tightened. "You don't need to think on him no more." She looked toward the small bundle beside her. "My baby, is she?" Jed moved aside so she could see. "She's fine. Hungry maybe, but strong." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't think we'd make it." Jed stirred the fire again. "You both did. That's what matters." Montage, days passing at the cabin. Jed chops wood outside in the cold, breath steaming, snowflakes melting into his beard. Inside, Clara struggles to sit up, feeding her baby, wrapping herself in Jed's old blanket. Jed fetches water from the stream, checks the traps and returns with rabbit meat. At night he carves something small and delicate by the fire, a wooden cradle, smooth and simple. Cabin, night. The fire crackled low. Clara stirred awake, startled by the sound of footsteps. Jed entered quietly, hanging his hat by the door. He noticed her eyes open. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't?" she whispered. "I can't sleep much." Jed nodded, pulling up a chair beside her bed. For a moment neither spoke. Only the baby's tiny breathing filled the air. "Why did you do it?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. "Why by me?" Jed looked into the fire. "Wasn't right what they were doing to you. I've seen men treat women like animals before. Couldn't watch it happen again." Her brow furrowed. "Again?" He hesitated. The flames flickered across his face, tracing the lines of old grief. "My wife, she died 2 winters back. Lost her and the baby both. Town folks didn't care much. They said it was God's will." Clara's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." Jed gave a slow nod. "After that I kept to myself. Didn't have reason to ride into town till that day. Guess maybe I was meant to be there." Clara swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "You didn't have to save me." "Maybe not," he said, meeting her eyes. "But I wanted to." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, gentle, not awkward. Something unspoken passed, like 2 broken souls recognizing the same kind of pain. Cabin, next morning. Sunlight spilled through the cracks in the shutters. Clara tried to stand, gripping the edge of the table for balance. Her body was still weak, but she was determined. Jed entered carrying a bucket of water. "You shouldn't be up yet." "I can't just lie there while you do everything," she said, voice still hoarse. You've already done too much. Jed set the bucket down, his tone firm but kind. Ain't too much. You got a child to care for. That's work enough. Clara managed a faint smile. You talk like you've done this before. He gave a small shrug. Maybe once. She noticed the wooden cradle beside the fire, newly finished. You made that. Jed rubbed the back of his neck. Had the parts laying around. Figured the little one needed something better than a basket. Clara touched the smooth edge, tears filling her eyes. No one's ever done something like this for me. Jed looked away, uncomfortable with the emotion in her voice. You don't owe me thanks, ma'am. I think I do, she whispered. XT, cabin, day. Snow fell lightly as Jed worked on repairing the roof. Clara sat on the porch, baby Hope cradled against her chest, humming softly, a melody her mother once sang before the world turned cruel. Jed paused, glancing down from the roof. The song carried through the still air, fragile and pure. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty. He smiled to himself, quietly, almost shyly. Cabin, night. Later that evening, the two shared a simple meal, beans, bread, and hot tea. The baby slept soundly nearby. Clara looked across the table at Jed. You risked a lot bringing me here. What if the townsfolk come looking? Jed's eyes hardened slightly. Let 'em come. Ain't the first time Red Hollows judged someone they didn't understand. She tilted her head. You've got a way of not caring what folks say. He smirked faintly. You learn to livin' out here. World's quieter when you stop listenin' to hate. Clara smiled for the first time, a real, soft smile that reached her tired eyes. Jed noticed, then quickly looked down at his cup, his heart beating faster than he'd like to admit. Later that night, the storm returned, wind howling against the shutters. Clara rose to calm the baby, but Jed was already there, rocking the cradle gently. You're good with her, Clara whispered, watching him. He shrugged. Guess I remember how. The baby reached a tiny hand toward him, clutching his finger. Jed froze, emotion flashing across his face, pain, wonder, something between the two. Clara saw it, her heart tightening. You miss them, don't you? Jed nodded slowly. Every day. A tear slipped down her cheek. I'm sorry. He turned to her, voice low. Don't be. You and that baby, you gave this place life again. You don't even know what that means to me. Clara looked down at the sleeping child, then back to him. Maybe we both needed saving. Their eyes met, the firelight flickering between them. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something began to thaw, the first fragile thread of connection between two people who'd lost everything and somehow found each other at the edge of the world. The morning sun rose slow over Red Hollow, spilling gold light across the crooked row of buildings. The saloon, the general store, the jailhouse, and the half-built church that still had no bell. Men leaned against hitching posts, spitting tobacco and swapping stories. Women swept porches, pretending not to listen. But whispers, sharp and ugly, spread faster than wildfire. Carter brought her up to his place, one man muttered. Ain't right talking in a woman like that, another hissed. Word is she's sick. Filthy. That baby ain't his. By noon, every soul in town had heard. Jed Carter, the quiet rancher from Mercy Ridge, had bought himself a woman and her bastard child. Saloon till midday. The piano player hit sour notes as men laughed too loud over their glasses. Sheriff Garth Willis, heavy-set and mean when sober, sat near the corner table listening. Fool thing for Carter to do, said Tom Briggs, the blacksmith. That girl was sold like a mule. Ain't Christian him keepin' her. Don't recall you knowin' much about Christian things, another man grinned. Laughter rolled. But Garth didn't laugh. He swirled his whiskey slow, eyes narrowing. Jed's a good man, he said. But folks don't forget fast in Red Hollow. Briggs spat into a tin. Good or not, no man takes in a woman like that without reason. The words hung in the smoky air, heavy, poisonous, and spreading. Axie. Mercy Ridge, Jed's cabin, late afternoon. Far from the gossip, Clara hung laundry behind the cabin. A soft wind carried the smell of pine and melting snow. The baby gurgled nearby in her cradle, sunlight warming her face. For the first time in weeks, Clara allowed herself to breathe, really breathe. She'd started to walk again, to cook small meals, to laugh quietly when Jed dropped a bowl or muttered to himself about the weather. Jed came from the barn, sleeves rolled, hands rough from work. He set down a bucket of feed and nodded at her. Looks like Hope's startin' to smile more. Clara smiled faintly. She does that when you talk. Maybe she likes your voice. Jed rubbed his neck, flustered. Don't know what she'd like about it. Sounds kind, Clara said softly. Their eyes met for a moment too long. Jed looked away first, busying himself with the horses. A soft peace hung in the air. For a while it almost felt like home. General store, Red Hollow, day, next morning. The bell above the door jingled as Jed entered. He tipped his hat at Mrs. Tolliver, the storekeeper's wife. "Morning, ma'am. Need flour, sugar, and some cloth for the baby." Mrs. Tolliver's smile was tight. I heard you've got company up your way." Jed's tone stayed calm. "I got a mother and a child needin' a roof. That's all." "Some folks say different," she replied, setting the sack of flour down a little too hard. "They say you bought yourself a woman." "Same one from that auction." Jed's jaw tightened. "People say all kinds of things when they're bored." Mrs. Tolliver leaned closer. "It's not right, Jed. You could bring trouble on yourself. That kind of woman brings shame with her." Jed's eyes met hers, cold, firm. "Ma'am, shame belongs to the ones who put her there, not the one who saved her." He dropped a few coins on the counter and left, the door slamming behind him. Mrs. Tolliver stared after him, lips pursed, already rehearsing how she'd retell the scene before sunset. Mercy Ridge, evening. The sun bled red over the ridge as Jed rode home with supplies. The wind carried faint voices, laughter, a distant horse. He slowed his mount. When he reached the cabin, the door was slightly ajar. He drew his revolver, heart thudding. Inside, Clara crouched near the fire, eyes wide, clutching Hope tight. A rock lay on the floor, shattered glass beside it. Someone had thrown it through the window. A crude note was tied to the stone. "Sin finds sinners." Clara's hands shook as she handed it to him. Who would do this? Jed's eyes darkened. "Town folks talkin'. Guess some talk turned ugly." "I told you," she whispered. "You should have left me there. They'll hate you for me." He stepped closer, his voice steady but fierce. "I don't give a damn what they think. They didn't see what I saw that day." Clara looked up at him, scared, fragile, but something in his words steadied her trembling. Jed reached down and picked up the baby, rocking her gently. "They can throw stones, but they don't get to touch what's mine to protect." Montage, the tension grows. Clara draws water at the well and feels eyes watching her from the tree line. Jed finds tracks near the fence, more than one horse. A group of men in town whisper near the blacksmith's forge. A candle flickers in the cabin window each night as they take turns keeping watch. Cabin, night. The wind rattled the shutters. The baby slept in her cradle. Clara sat near the fire, mending Jed's shirt. Jed leaned against the wall, cleaning his rifle. "They'll get tired of talking. Folks always do." She gave a bitter smile. "You really believe that?" He looked at her quietly. "No. But I know hate don't last as long as love does." She set the shirt aside, her eyes glistening. "You talk like you've loved before." "I have," he said softly. "And I lost it. Thought that was the end of it for me." Clara hesitated, then whispered, "Maybe this isn't the end." Jed met her gaze. The silence between them deepened, not heavy but full of something new. Then a sudden sound, a horse outside. Jed was on his feet instantly, gun drawn. He opened the door to find a lantern swinging from a post, left burning. No rider. Just a sign scrawled on a scrap of wood. "She doesn't belong here." Jed crushed the sign in his hand, jaw tight. "Let him come," he muttered. Behind him, Clara whispered, "You can't fight a whole town, Jed." He turned back, eyes fierce, protective. "I ain't fightin' for the town. I'm fightin' for you." Cabin, night later. The firelight flickered in the window. Jed sat on the porch, rifle across his lap, keeping watch. Inside, through the glass, Clara rocked the baby to sleep, her shadow outlined by the hearth's glow. For a long while, Jed stared out into the darkness, listening to the wind whistle through the pines. And though danger crept closer with each whisper carried from Red Hollow for that night, beneath the wild sky, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Mist blanketed the ridge like a veil, soft and cold. The first light of dawn cut through the trees, revealing Jed Carter's cabin, quiet, still, peaceful for the first time in days. Inside, Clara Belle was humming softly to Hope, who cooed and reached tiny hands toward her mother's face. Jed stepped out of the barn, sleeves rolled, bringing in a bucket of milk and a smile that reached his tired eyes. He paused at the door, watching them, mother and child bathed in the pale gold of morning. For a brief moment, life felt almost normal. "Looks like you both slept better," Jed said. Clara smiled faintly. "Hope slept. I just watched her." He nodded, setting the milk down. "Can't blame you. Ain't much peace in the world, best to hold on to what we get." Clara looked up, her tone softer. You talk like a preacher sometimes, Jed Carter? He grinned a little. Nah. Just a man who's seen enough loss to know what matters. Mercy Ridge Trail, midday. The stillness broke. Down the trail, 3 riders appeared, Earl Bell at the front, his coat filthy and his grin mean, with the sheriff, Garth Willis, and a deputy behind him. Dust rose around their horses as they rode hard toward the cabin. Cabin, continuous. The baby started crying as if she sensed what was coming. Clara froze. Jed looked out the window, his expression hardening. Stay inside, he said, grabbing his hat and stepping out the door. Cabin, moments later. Jed met them in the yard, hand resting calmly near his holster. Earl dismounted with a swagger. Well, ain't this a pretty picture? You playin' husband to my sister now? Jed's voice was steady, low. You got no business here. Earl spat in the dirt. She's my kin. That makes it my business. You took her without permission. Sheriff says that's kidnappinda. Garth shifted uneasily in his saddle. Now, Jed, you know I got to look into this. Town's been talkin'. Claims you're keepin' that girl against her will. Jed's jaw tightened. She was being auctioned off like cattle. You call that willin'? Earl smirked. You paid for her, didn't ya? Bought her same as any man buys stock. Clara appeared in the doorway, baby in her arms. Stop it, she shouted. He saved me, Earl. You sold me. You tried to. Earl's voice rose above hers. See that sheriff? She's confused. He's got her scared. Jed stepped forward, but the deputy raised his rifle. Jed Carter, the sheriff said regretfully, you'll come with us till we sort this out. Jed held up his hands. You're making a mistake, Garth. I don't want trouble, the sheriff said, lowering his gaze. But you know how this town is. Clara's voice cracked. No. Please, he didn't take me. The sheriff wouldn't meet her eyes. Earl sneered. Guess you ain't so mighty now, cowboy. As Jed was led toward the horses, he turned to Clara. Stay here. Don't let anyone in. You hear me? Tears streaked her face. Jed. But he was already mounted and riding down the trail between armed men. Red Hollow, jailhouse, evening. The cell was small, cold, and dimly lit. Jed sat on the bench, staring at the floor. Outside the bars, Sheriff Garth leaned against his desk, hat in hand. Never thought I'd see you in here, Carter, he said quietly. But the town's riled up. Preacher says you're livin' in sin. Men like Briggs want you run out or worse. Jed looked up, eyes burning. You know I didn't take her. The sheriff sighed. I know. But truth don't count for much when men want blood. Outside, thunder rumbled. Exit Mercy Ridge, night. Back at the cabin, rain poured hard. Clara tried to keep the fire alive, rocking the crying baby in her arms. She stared at the empty chair by the hearth, the one Jed always sat in, and something inside her broke. She wrapped Hope tight in a blanket, threw on her shawl, and stepped out into the storm. Exit Red Hollow Road, night. The rain lashed her face as she stumbled through the mud, boots sinking, feet bleeding. Every step was agony, but she didn't stop. The baby whimpered against her chest. Lightning flashed. The town was still miles ahead. Hold on, Hope, she whispered, half delirious. Mama's comin'. We'll make it, we'll make it. Red Hollow, courthouse, morning. By dawn the courthouse was packed. Word had spread that the auction girl had come to testify. Clara burst through the doors, soaked, shivering, eyes wild with exhaustion. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The sheriff looked stunned. Clara? She lifted her head, her voice trembling but fierce. You want the truth? He didn't take me. He saved me. My own brother sold me for whiskey. He dragged me on that stage while I was still bleeding from childbirth. The room fell silent. Even the judge froze, hand hovering midair. Clara stepped closer to the bench, clutching the baby. Jed Carter bought my life back. And you want to call that a crime? Earl tried to shout her down. She's lying. But the sheriff turned toward him, eyes narrowing. That true, Earl? You sold her? Earl stammered. She was. Answer me. Earl's mouth worked soundlessly. The crowd's murmur turned from curiosity to disgust. The sheriff slammed his hand on the desk. That's enough. Jed Carter's free. Exit courthouse, day later. Rain had stopped. The clouds parted just enough to let a thin beam of light touch the courthouse steps. Jed walked out, rubbing the red marks from his wrists. Clara stood there waiting, holding Hope close. When she saw him, she froze, afraid he might turn away. But Jed just stopped in front of her, silent, eyes soft. You shouldn't have come in that storm. I had to, she whispered. I couldn't let them take you for something good. He reached out and brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. You could have died. Clara smiled weakly. Would have been worth it. Jed swallowed hard, his voice rough. Don't say that. He looked down at Hope, who blinked up at him wide-eyed. Guess I owe this little one my thanks. She owes you more, Clara said quietly. So do I. He shook his head. No debts between us, Clara. Not anymore. The sheriff stepped out behind them, hat in hand. Town'll take time to forget, but truth's out now. Maybe things'll ease up. Jed looked toward the horizon, toward Mercy Ridge, and nodded. We'll be headin' home. As they walked away, Earl shouted after them from the jailhouse window, his voice hoarse and hateful. Jed didn't even glance back. Mercy Ridge, sunset. The sky glowed orange and violet as they rode home, Clara wrapped in Jed's coat, baby nestled safe between them. The cabin came into view, smoke curling from its chimney. Clara whispered, home. Jed glanced down at her, quiet. That's what I was thinking. The horse carried them across the ridge, the last light fading behind them. Two broken souls and a newborn, bound not by law or blood, but something stronger, the courage to start again. Snowflakes drifted silently over Mercy Ridge, covering the log cabin, the barn, and the half-frozen creek below. The world looked still, but the cold was sharp enough to bite through bone. Inside, Jed Carter was splitting logs by the hearth, sweat mixing with the frost in his beard. The fire cracked, glowing bright in the dim cabin. Clara Bell, now stronger and steadier on her feet, folded blankets near the fire. Little Hope lay bundled in a handmade cradle, soft coos filling the silence. Reckon the storm's comin' early, Jed said, glancing at the window. Sky's got that kind of gray that don't lift for days. Clara looked up, concern flickering in her eyes. Will we have enough wood? Jed nodded. Enough for a week if I keep at it. She hesitated, then said softly, You always make sure we do. Jed paused mid-swing. Something in her tone, quiet gratitude, hit him deeper than he expected. He smiled faintly. Ain't much else worth doing out here but keepin' folks alive. Mercy Ridge, later. The wind had started to howl. Snow whipped sideways, blinding and thick. Jed led the horse into the barn, tying her safely before latching the doors tight. Inside, the air smelled of hay and leather. He brushed the mare's neck. Easy now, girl. We'll ride it out together. Then through the storm he thought he heard Hope's cry, faint and far. His stomach tightened. Cabin, continuous. Clara was pacing, her arms around the baby, who was whimpering weakly. When Jed burst through the door, snow clinging to his coat, she turned toward him, pale. Jed, she's burning up. He was beside her in 2 strides, hand pressing against the baby's forehead. The heat was fierce, unnatural. She's got a fever, he said grimly. How long? Started an hour ago. I tried cool rags, but it's getting worse. Jed's eyes darted to the window. The storm outside was howling like a wild thing. No horse could make it through that. She won't last the night without help, Clara whispered, voice breaking. Jed hesitated, torn between logic and instinct. The town was miles away, the trail nearly invisible now. I'll get Doc Reeves, he said, grabbing his coat. Clara caught his arm. You'll die out there. He met her eyes, steady and fierce. If I stay, she dies. I can't let that happen. Her lips trembled. Then I'm going too. He shook his head firmly. You'll stay. She needs you if I don't make it. Before she could answer, he leaned down, pressed a rough, brief kiss to Hope's forehead, then another to Clara's hair. Keep her warm, he said softly, and was gone into the storm. Mountain trail, night. The world was white chaos. Snow blinded him, wind clawed at his face. Jed pushed through, one hand gripping the reins, the other holding the lantern that barely stayed lit. The horse stumbled, nearly fell. Jed steadied her, coughing through the frost in his throat. Come on, girl. Just a little farther, he muttered. The storm roared in answer. Then, a distant shape appeared, a faint light through the snow. The Doc's place, Jed gasped. Doc Reeves' cabin, later that night. The door slammed open. Jed stumbled in, nearly collapsing. Doc, baby sick, fever? The old man looked up from his desk, startled. Carter? You're half frozen. Sit down. No time, Jed rasped. She's burning up. I need something to bring it down. Doc Reeves quickly gathered a satchel, bottles, herbs, a tin of salve. You'll never make it back tonight. I'll make it. The doctor studied his face and saw the truth in it, A man who'd walk through death for the ones waiting on the other side. He handed over the satchel. "Godspeed, Carter." Jed nodded once and vanished back into the blizzard. Exit mountain trail, hours later. The storm had worsened. The wind screamed like a banshee through the trees. Jed's hands were numb, his beard frozen solid. His horse stumbled again, and this time didn't rise. He sank to his knees beside her, chest heaving. The satchel was still in his arms, but the world spun around him. For a moment he saw Clara's face in his mind, her eyes begging him to come home. "Not yet," he whispered. "I ain't quittin' that." He forced himself up and began walking, each step a fight against the wind. The satchel pressed to his chest like the last ember of life he had left. Cabin, dawn. Clara sat by the fire, rocking Hope, singing softly despite her trembling voice. The baby's cries had grown faint, her breathing shallow. Then, a knock on the door. She froze, heart in her throat. It opened slowly and there he was, half covered in ice, blood on his knuckles, eyes barely open, but alive. He stumbled in, collapsing near the fire. "Got the medicine," he gasped, pulling the satchel open. Clara was already there, hands shaking as she followed his instructions. They gave the baby drops of tincture, wrapped her tighter, and held her close between them both by the fire. Minutes passed like hours. Then a small sound. A cough. A tiny, fragile cry. Clara's tears spilled freely. "She's breathing steady." Jed closed his eyes, relief washing over his exhausted face. "Told you I'd make it." She looked at him, voice trembling. "You could have died." He met her gaze weakly, whispering, "Worth it." Clara pressed her forehead to his, her voice breaking. "Don't ever do that again." He chuckled softly. "No promises." Later that day. The storm eased. The cabin glowed warm, fire crackling bright. Hope slept peacefully in her cradle. Clara sat close to Jed, tending to his frostbitten hands. "You shouldn't have gone alone," she said gently. "Couldn't let her go like that," he murmured. She looked up, her eyes glistening. "You didn't just save her, Jed. You saved me too." He turned toward her, the silence between them filled with something unspoken, something fragile yet real. Outside, snow glistened under the first light of a calm morning. Inside, warmth spread through the cabin, not just from the fire, but from the bond of three souls who'd nearly lost everything and found family instead. Early spring morning. Snowmelt dripped from the trees. The mountains glowed with pale gold light. The long, merciless winter had finally broken. Jed Carter's cabin stood strong, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. Inside, laughter, soft and shy, echoed for the first time in months. Cabin, continuous. Clara Bell stirred a pot over the fire, humming while Hope played with a wooden toy carved by Jed. The baby's giggles filled the room. Jed came in from outside, arms full of chopped wood, boots muddy from the thawing ground. Clara turned, smiling. "You're supposed to be resting." Jed smirked. "Can't rest with spring comin'. Fence needs fixin', roof needs patchin'. You'll wear yourself down again," she said, brushing sawdust from his shoulder. He looked at her for a long moment, at the tenderness she gave so freely now, and said quietly, "You sound like a wife." The words hung in the air. Clara froze, her cheeks flushing. "I didn't mean," Jed began. But she smiled faintly. "I know what you meant." They shared a silence that said more than words could, until the sound of hooves shattered the peace. XD. Cabin, continuous. Jed stepped out, hand instinctively near his revolver. Down the ridge, 3 riders were approaching. He recognized the first one immediately, Deputy Briggs, the man who had called him a criminal months ago. 2 other townsmen rode behind him, rifles slung. Jed's jaw tightened. "Stay inside," he told Clara. Briggs dismounted, his face hard and cold. "You got nerves stayin' up here like nothing happened." Jed stood firm. "Ain't hidin'." "Got no reason to." Briggs sneered. "Town says different. Preacher wants you out. Says the woman and her brat don't belong here, says she's cursed." Jed's eyes darkened. "That woman's name is Clara. And that brat is a child you'll show respect for." Briggs smirked. "Or what? You'll shoot me, Carter?" Jed's hand didn't move. "Not unless you give me a reason." One of the men spat. "You're protectin' a whore, Carter. Don't matter how many storms you survive, sin's still sin." The insult struck deep. Before Jed could respond, the cabin door opened. Clara stepped out, baby in her arms. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned. "If standing by a man who saved my life is sin," she said steadily, "then I'll take my chances with God, not men like you." Briggs laughed coldly. You best pack up, lady. Town's votin' Sunday. If you're still here, we'll come back, and we won't come peaceful. Jed took one slow step forward. You set foot on this ridge again and I'll bury you where you stand. Briggs hesitated, just for a heartbeat, then spat in the dirt and turned his horse. As they rode off, Jed stood motionless, chest heaving with quiet rage. Clara whispered, "They'll come back, won't they?" He nodded. "They will." Cabin, night. A storm of a different kind brewed. Jed sat at the table, cleaning his rifle. Clara rocked Hope near the fire, her face pale with worry. "They won't stop, Jed," she said. "Not till we're gone." Jed shook his head. "This is my land. My father's before me. I won't run from men like Briggs." Clara looked down at Hope. "And if they kill you? What happens to us?" He looked up, his voice low. "Then I'll make sure they go through me first." Her breath caught, a mix of fear and love she couldn't name. Mercy Ridge, 2 days later, dusk. The ridge was quiet. The sky turned orange, the air heavy. Jed stood outside, watching the horizon. He'd been waiting all day, knowing in his gut that trouble was coming. Then he saw it, torchlight flickering between the trees. "They're here," he muttered. He turned to Clara, who was already clutching Hope, her eyes wide. "Hide behind the barn," he said. "Stay low. Don't come out till it's done." She shook her head. "Jed, please." "Go, Clara." His voice broke. "Please." Tears streamed down her face, but she obeyed, vanishing into the shadows with the baby. Cabin yard. Moments later. The mob appeared, 6 men this time, Briggs at the front. "Well now," Briggs drawled. "Looks like you were expectin' us." Jed's voice was calm, deadly. "You boys ride up my ridge with torches and guns? That's a mistake you'll only make once." Briggs smirked. "We're here to send a message. Ain't no place for fallen women or their saviors in Red Hollow." Jed raised his rifle. "Guess you'll have to carve that message in lead." The standoff hung thick as the dusk wind. Then a gunshot. Chaos erupted. Men ducked behind barrels, the torches flared. Jed returned fire, his aim deadly precise. One man went down, clutching his shoulder. The others retreated behind trees, shouting curses. Jed fired again, warning shots this time, driving them back down the trail. Briggs, bleeding from a grazed arm, yelled, "This ain't over, Carter. You hear me?" Jed's voice echoed across the ridge, thunder in his tone. "It's over when I say it is." The mob finally broke, disappearing into the dark. Barn. Moments later. Clara emerged from hiding, trembling. "Jed." He turned, lowering his rifle, breathing hard. "It's done," he said softly. "They're gone." She ran to him, clutching Hope tight in one arm and grabbing his coat with the other. I thought you were dead." He brushed snow from her hair, voice rough. "Takes more than that to stop me." Her tears spilled freely as she looked up at him. "Why do you keep doing this for me?" He hesitated, eyes full of something raw and unguarded. "Because you and that baby, you gave me something I didn't think I'd ever have again, a reason." For a moment, the world around them disappeared, just the fire of the torches dying in the snow, and 2 souls who'd finally stopped running. Cabin. Later that night. The fire burned low. Clara sat beside Jed, who was silent, staring into the flames. "You think they'll come back?" she asked softly. Jed's voice was steady. "Maybe. But next time they won't find us alone." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned toward her. "I sent word to Sheriff Garth this morning. Told him what Briggs was planning. The law's riding out tomorrow." Clara exhaled in relief. "You think he'll come?" Jed nodded slowly. "He's a good man. And he owes me one." She leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion in every breath. "I'm tired of running, Jed." He looked down at her, her hair falling against his chest, Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms, and whispered, "You don't have to run anymore." Mercy Ridge, dawn. The first light touched the cabin, painting it gold. Smoke rose from the chimney. The world was still again. But beneath that calm, both of them knew, the fight wasn't over. Not yet. And when it came, they'd face it together. Morning after the attack. Smoke rose faintly from the blackened earth near the fence line, remnants of torches the mob had dropped when they fled. Snow melted in dark streaks across the thawing ground. Jed Carter stood quietly in the yard, rifle in hand, scanning the tree line. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp and weary, a man who'd been pushed too far, yet still refused to break. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Clara Bell stepped out, Hope bundled against her chest, wrapped in a soft blanket. She's still sleeping, Clara said softly. Didn't wake once all night. Jed nodded, never turning. Good. She don't need to see none of this. The silence stretched between them, heavy as fog. Clara stepped closer. You can't keep fightin' the world alone, Jed. He finally looked at her. Ain't fightin' the world. Just the pieces of it that don't know right from wrong. Exie Ridge Trail, midday. The sound of hooves echoed through the valley. A small posse of riders appeared, Sheriff Garth at the front, a white flag of truce tied to his saddle horn. Jed watched from the ridge as they approached. Clara gripped his arm. You think they're here for peace? Won't know till I hear it, Jed muttered, stepping forward. XD. Cabin yard, continuous. Sheriff Garth dismounted slowly. Jed. Clara. Jed gave a curt nod. Sheriff. Behind Garth, 2 deputies were dragging a bound Briggs, his arm in a sling, eyes filled with hatred. Garth cleared his throat. Briggs and his men attacked your home without warrant. That's a hanging offense if we go by the law. Jed raised an eyebrow. Then why's he still breathin'? The sheriff sighed. Because the town's split. Half want him jailed, half say you provoked him. There'll be a hearing in Red Hollow. You'll need to come with me. Clara's face paled. A hearing? For defending us. Garth met her eyes, weary but firm. It's the law, ma'am. Even good men have to answer to it. Jed nodded slowly. Then I'll answer. Red Hollow, courthouse, day. The small frontier courthouse was packed to bursting. Townsfolk crowded every bench and corner, whispers, sneers, and judgment hanging thick in the air. At the front, Jed stood tall beside Sheriff Garth, hat in hand. Clara sat behind him, hope asleep in her arms, her expression trembling between fear and pride. Judge Halford, a stern man with a gray beard, banged his gavel. This hearing concerns Jedediah Carter, accused of discharging a weapon and wounding 2 men during an unlawful altercation. Mr. Carter, how do you plead? Jed's voice was calm, steady. Not guilty, Your Honor. Just protectin' what's mine. The judge nodded. You may speak your piece. Jed stepped forward. The room fell silent. I bought this land fair and worked it with my own hands. The woman and child you see there, they weren't strangers. They were victims. And when I found 'em bein' sold like mules, I did what any man with a heart would do. He looked toward the crowd, the same faces that had once called him neighbor. You call yourselves God-fearin'. But when a woman begged for mercy, not one of you stood up. You turned your eyes away. I won't ever do that. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some nodded. Others glared. Then Briggs, still in cuffs, shouted from the back. He's lyin'. He took her for himself. He's been livin' in sin under God's sky. The judge slammed his gavel. Order. But Clara was already on her feet. That's a lie. She stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. I bled from childbirth the day he found me. My brother, that man's friend, sold me like a sack of grain. Jed Carter bought me only to save me. He gave me a bed, food, and peace. The only thing he ever took was the burden off my shoulders. Her words echoed through the courthouse like thunder. She turned to the crowd, tears in her eyes. And if you want to call love a sin, then I guess we're all guilty. Silence. Even the judge looked down, humbled. Extra Red Hollow, outside the courthouse, later. The crowd spilled out into the street, whispering. The judge's verdict echoed from within. Jed Carter is hereby cleared of all charges. Deputy Briggs and accomplices to be held for unlawful assault and arson. The sheriff stepped out, hat in hand. You're a free man, Jed. You too, Miss Bell. Clara let out a shaky breath, clutching hope close. Jed turned to her with a faint smile. Reckon that's the first time I ever been called free. Garth chuckled. You earned it. The town's got a long way to go, but maybe this'll change a few minds. As the sheriff rode off, Clara turned to Jed. What happens now? Jed looked toward the ridge in the distance. They're home. Now, we go back. Fix the fence. Plant something. Start living again. She smiled softly. Together? He hesitated, then took her hand gently. If you'll have me. She looked down at their joined hands, rough and scarred but steady. Jed Carter, I already do. Mercy Ridge, sunset. They rode back through the valley, golden light spilling across the land. The cabin stood waiting, strong as ever. Hope babbled softly between them on the horse, reaching toward the sunlight. Clara laughed through her tears. She likes the light. Jed smiled. She's her mama's daughter. They dismounted near the cabin. Clara turned toward him, her voice soft as the wind. After all the storms and blood and pain, Why'd you keep fighting for us? Jed looked at her, eyes full of quiet fire. Because I reckon God don't make families. We build 'em, one choice, one heartbeat at a time. She stepped closer, resting her head on his chest. Then I guess we built ours. He wrapped his arm around her, the setting sun burning orange behind them. The camera slowly pulls back, the ridge stretching endlessly, a lone cabin glowing warm against the wild horizon. In a world that judged by sin and scars, a cowboy and a broken girl built something stronger than both. A home, a name, a love that no man could auction and no storm could take.